Marcus Reed stepped into the glass-walled executive office already bracing for impact. Termination, demotion, quiet removal from the biggest project of his career. Those were the outcomes his mind rehearsed as the door closed behind him with a soft, final click. But the woman standing behind the desk wasn't holding a performance review. She wasn't holding anything at all. Lena Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Global Advisory, the most feared woman on the 47th floor, didn't look at her screen. She didn't gesture for him to sit. She simply locked the door, turned the privacy switch red, and lowered her voice until it barely carried across the room. "I'm pregnant," she said. Marcus felt the air leave his chest. Then she added the 5 words that cracked his world straight down the middle. "And the baby is yours." The silence that followed was violent, not loud but crushing. 3 months ago, one night. One moment neither of them had planned, neither had spoken of since. A mistake buried beneath deadlines, discipline, and denial. And now it stood between them, breathing. Marcus didn't sit. If he did, he wasn't sure he'd stand again. Lena finally met his eyes. The ice queen calm the business press loved to praise was fractured now, replaced by something raw and unsteady. Her hands trembled as she folded them together, as if willing them to stop. "I've seen 3 doctors," she continued, professional instinct trying and failing to reclaim control. "I'm 12 weeks along. The timeline is conclusive. 12 weeks. Marcus's mind snapped backward to a corporate gala, a night that ended far later than it should have. To grief shared in whispers. To 2 exhausted people finding shelter in each other when neither had the strength to stand alone. He should have left that night. He didn't. Now biology had returned with receipts. "I'm not asking anything from you," Lena said quickly, already reaching for a folder on her desk. "I've spoken to legal. There are options. Clean ones, options." The word hit Marcus like an insult. He had spent his entire adult life erasing the concept of mistakes. As a black man rising through an industry that tolerated excellence but punished imperfection, Marcus Reed had learned early that survival meant precision. No scandals, no rumors, no cracks in the armor. He'd learned it watching his father work himself into exhaustion just to be overlooked. He'd learned it in college lecture halls where his success was questioned before it was celebrated. And he'd learned it most painfully 7 years ago, standing in a hospital room as his wife, Naomi, slipped away, leaving him alone with a 4-year-old daughter and a grief that never fully loosened its grip. Perfection became his refuge, his prison. Now Lena Whitmore stood before him with a truth that threatened to shatter both. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Before you turn this into a transaction," he said, "you need to know something." Lena stilled. "I'm not disappearing." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe even fear. Outside the window, the city moved on, unaware that 2 lives had just tilted off their axis. And Marcus Reed, for the first time in years, felt the storm he'd spent his life outrunning finally catch up to him. If you're feeling this story already, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us. Because what happens next will challenge everything Marcus believes about control, courage, and fatherhood. Because the next choice he makes won't just cost him his career, it may cost him his daughter's trust. Marcus Reed left the executive floor without remembering how he got to the elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing him inside a mirrored box that reflected a man he barely recognized. His tie was still perfectly centered. His posture was flawless. But behind his eyes, something was unraveling fast. Pregnant. His boss. With his child. The elevator chimed softly as it descended, each floor feeling like a countdown to consequences he hadn't yet named. By the time he reached the parking garage, Marcus had already mapped out a dozen disaster scenarios. Office gossip, boardroom whispers, his reputation reduced to a headline he couldn't outrun. An ambitious black executive sleeps his way into favor. He could hear the judgment already, sharpened by race, amplified by power. He sat in his car for several minutes before turning the key. Home was supposed to be safe, but even as he drove, Marcus knew he wouldn't leave this storm at the door. The porch light was on when he pulled into the driveway. Inside, the house hummed with quiet, familiar, fragile peace. 12-year-old Aaliyah was curled up on the couch, glasses sliding down her nose as she pretended to read while clearly waiting for him. "You're late," she said, not looking up. "The meeting ran long," Marcus replied automatically. The lie landed too easily. Aaliyah lowered the book and studied him the way she always did when something felt off. She had her mother's eyes, sharp, observant, unwilling to accept half-truths. "You okay?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "Just tired." Another lie, they stacked like bricks in his chest. Later, after dinner sat untouched and homework was reviewed, Marcus retreated to his home office. A framed photo sat on the desk, Naomi laughing on a windy beach, hair everywhere, joy effortless. His chest tightened. He whispered the question before he could stop himself. "What would you tell me to do?" Naomi, of course, didn't answer. But he heard her voice anyway. He always did. Stop hiding behind being responsible. Living scared isn't living at all. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Whitmore Global Advisory before sunrise. He didn't plan it. His body moved on instinct, seeking control where it could still be found. Lena was already there, always was. She looked up as he entered her office, expression carefully neutral. "I assume you've reviewed the options," she said. Marcus didn't sit. "I'm not choosing from a menu," he replied, "and I'm not letting this become something we manage in silence." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand the risk." "I understand it better than you think," Marcus said quietly. "I've been calculating risk my entire life." He thought of Aaliyah, on the way she watched him, of the lessons he taught without words. "I won't be the man who disappears because it's convenient," he continued. "Whatever decision you make, you're not making it alone." For the first time since he'd known her, Lena Whitmore didn't have an answer ready. As Marcus walked back onto the floor, he felt eyes tracking him through glass walls. Whispers hadn't started yet, but he could feel them forming. The storm wasn't public, not yet, but it was coming, and Marcus Reed was standing directly in its path. Next time the whispers begin, and one question will threaten everything he's built. The first whisper reached Marcus Reed on a Tuesday morning. He was standing at the coffee machine on the 39th floor when two junior analysts behind the glass divider forgot to lower their voices. "Have you noticed how often Marcus gets pulled into Lena's office lately?" "Yeah, third time this week, right? It must be nice having that kind of access." Marcus didn't turn around. He didn't react. He simply poured his coffee, steady as ever, and walked back to his desk with the familiar weight settling between his shoulders. This was how it always started. Never accusations, never facts, just a suggestion. And suggestion was enough to rot a reputation from the inside out. By the end of the week, the atmosphere had shifted. Colleagues who once lingered by his desk now found reasons to be elsewhere. Meetings he'd normally be looped into arrived late, or not at all. Conversations lowered when he passed, then resumed once he was gone. Subtle, polite, plausibly deniable, the most dangerous kind of change. Lena, for her part, maintained distance in public. She spoke to Marcus only in meetings, her tone crisp, impersonal. Anyone watching would see nothing unusual, but Marcus noticed the details others missed. The way she scheduled meetings earlier than usual, as if mornings were easier. The way she gripped the edge of the table when presentations dragged on. The looser cuts of her suits, chosen not for style but necessity. The secret was growing. And secrets had weight. One Thursday afternoon, an assistant pinged Marcus with a calendar update. HR review, conference room C mandatory. No agenda, no explanation. The room was already occupied when he arrived. Helen Morris, head of human resources, sat at the table with a legal consultant Marcus had never met. Folders were neatly arranged. Smiles were practiced. "Marcus," Helen said warmly, "thank you for coming on short notice." "Of course," he replied, taking a seat. "What's this about?" "Routine clarification," she said, opening a folder. "We've noticed an increase in your private meetings with Miss Whitmore." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Several high-priority initiatives require direct collaboration." "I'm sure," Helen said. "However, company policy requires us to ensure professional boundaries are being maintained, especially where power dynamics exist." The questions came carefully. When did the meetings begin? What was discussed? Were there any interactions outside office hours? Marcus answered truthfully where he could, cautiously where he had to. He measured every word, knowing one wrong phrase could be twisted into something permanent. When the meeting finally ended, his shirt clung slightly to his back. Pressure had a temperature. That evening, Lena was waiting near his car in the underground garage. "I heard about HR," she said, voice low. "I'm sorry," Marcus glanced around instinctively. "It was inevitable." "This is exactly why I wanted to handle this quietly," she said. "If this gets out, you'll be the one they tear apart." He met her gaze. "I knew that when I stayed." She studied him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind her composure. At home, Aaliyah was quieter than usual. "Mrs. Carter asked me if you were seeing someone," she said casually, not meeting his eyes. Marcus froze. "What did you say?" "That you weren't." A pause. "Was that right?" He nodded slowly. Aaliyah didn't look convinced. "You've been different," she said. "Whatever's going on, I hope you're not choosing the easy way out." The words followed Marcus long after she closed her bedroom door. Because deep down, he knew the hardest choices were still ahead. and the next one would force him to choose between silence or standing in the open where everything could be taken from him. The crisis arrived without warning. Marcus Reed was midway through a budget review when his phone vibrated once against the conference table, sharp, insistent. He glanced down, expecting a reminder or a missed call from Aaliyah's school. Instead, it was an emergency alert. Lena Whitmore collapsed during a board presentation. Ambulance en route to St. Alden Medical Center. For a moment, Marcus couldn't breathe. The room around him continued as if nothing had happened, voices debating percentages, pens scratching notes, coffee cups clinking softly. It felt obscene how normal everything looked while his world tilted violently off balance. He stood. "I need to step out," he said, already moving. No one stopped him. The drive to the hospital blurred into red lights and clenched fists. Marcus barely remembered parking, barely remembered giving his name at the desk. His pulse roared in his ears as a nurse finally appeared and looked directly at him. "Mr. Reed," she asked. "She's asking for you." The waiting area went silent. Executives who had arrived ahead of him, board members, senior partners, turned as one. Their eyes followed Marcus as he walked past them, expressions tightening with suspicion and something colder. Why him? That question hung heavy as he followed the nurse down the corridor. Lena lay in the hospital bed, stripped of her armor. No tailored suit, no authority in her posture, just pale skin, tangled hair, and machines quietly insisting she stay alive. She turned her head when Marcus entered. "Close the door," she said weakly. He did. "Preeclampsia," she said before he could ask. "Early signs, they caught it in time for now." Marcus pulled a chair to her bedside and sat. "What does that mean?" "It means I can't keep pretending this isn't happening," she replied bitterly. "The doctors want rest, reduced stress, medical leave." A humorless laugh escaped her. "Imagine telling the board that." Marcus leaned forward. "Your health matters more than optics," her eyes flashed. "You don't understand. If I step back now, they'll call it weakness. They'll replace me before I can fight." He thought of Aaliyah, of Naomi, of everything he'd learned too late. "Then we fight differently," he said. "Together." Lena looked at him then, not as a CEO, not as a strategist, but as a woman terrified of losing control. "They're already suspicious," she whispered. "If they connect you to this, to me, you'll be destroyed." Marcus didn't flinch. "I won't run." Silence stretched between them, punctuated by the steady beep of monitors. "I don't know how to do this," Lena admitted quietly. "I've never needed anyone." Marcus reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. "Neither did I until I did." Later that night, Marcus stood in the hospital hallway as a senior board member blocked his path. "This situation is concerning," the man said coolly. "We'll be reviewing everything." Marcus met his gaze without backing down. "So will I." When Marcus finally returned home, Aaliyah was waiting up. "You weren't at work," she said. "I felt it." He sat beside her, exhausted, honest. "Something happened," he said, "and it's going to change things." Aaliyah studied him carefully. "Are you finally going to stop hiding?" Marcus didn't answer, because tomorrow he would have to decide whether to stand in front of the board or let the story be written without him. And the next choice would cost him more than silence ever did. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the 49th floor, the city laid out beneath like a reminder of how small one person could be. A table long enough to seat 20 dominated the room, polished to a mirror shine. Portraits of former executives stared down from the walls, men who had built power by never being questioned. Marcus Reed stood at the far end, refusing the chair offered to him. Across the table sat the board of Whitmore Global Advisory. At the head was Daniel Cross, interim chair, and a man who smiled only when he believed he was winning. "Mr. Reed," Daniel began smoothly, "we've asked you here to clarify certain concerns regarding your proximity to Miss Whitmore." Marcus nodded once. "I'm prepared to do that." A murmur rippled around the table. Daniel folded his hands. "Rumors suggest an inappropriate relationship between you and the CEO. Given the current medical situation, we find this troubling." Marcus inhaled slowly. This was the moment he'd spent his life avoiding. He didn't hedge, he didn't soften the truth. "I am the father of Lena Whitmore's child," he said. The reaction was immediate. Voices overlapped. The chairs shifted. Someone swore under their breath. The word liability surfaced more than once. Daniel raised a hand for silence, though satisfaction flickered behind his eyes. "This confirms our fears," he said. "A subordinate involved with the CEO, this compromises everything." Marcus didn't move. "What compromises this company," he said calmly, "is pretending this is about ethics instead of control." Several heads snapped toward him. "We were two consenting adults," Marcus continued. No promotions, no favors, no decisions were influenced. Every project I've led has exceeded expectations long before this happened. Daniel scoffed. Perception matters. I agree, Marcus said, which is why I'm standing here instead of hiding. The room quieted. I'm formally disclosing the relationship, he said. I'm prepared for oversight reassignment, whatever accountability you deem necessary, but I will not disappear. And I will not allow Lena's pregnancy to be weaponized to push her out. A woman near the end of the table leaned forward. And why should we believe you? Marcus met her eyes. Because my work speaks louder than your assumptions. He listed the results. Clients retained, deals closed. Revenue growth is directly tied to his leadership. He spoke without arrogance, only fact. Silence followed. Then Daniel leaned back. Even if we accept that, he said, the damage is done. Miss Whitmore's condition raises serious questions about her ability to lead. Marcus felt anger rise, but he kept his voice steady. Her condition raises questions about your humanity, he replied, not her competence. The vote happened quickly, not unanimous, but decisive. Lena would remain CEO with temporary oversight. Marcus would stay with formal disclosure and boundaries enforced. It wasn't a victory, but it was an erasure. As Marcus left the boardroom, a senior director stopped him in the hall. That took courage, she said quietly. Marcus shook his head. It took running out of places to hide. That night he told Aaliyah the truth. Not pieces, not softened edges, everything. She listened without interrupting, arms crossed, eyes locked on his. When he finished, she asked one question. Did you stand up or step back? Marcus swallowed. I stood up. Aaliyah nodded slowly. Good, because I was scared you wouldn't. As she walked away, Marcus realized something had shifted. The board hadn't decided his future. He had, but the hardest test was still coming, because Lena hadn't said what she wanted yet. And the next decision wouldn't be made in a boardroom, it would be made in fear. Lena Whitmore didn't call for 3 days, not after the board meeting. Not after Marcus stood in front of people who had spent years waiting for him to fail, not even to argue. The silence was worse than anger. Marcus told himself she was resting. That medical leave meant boundaries. That distance was practical, but deep down he knew better. On the 4th evening, his phone finally rang. Lena's name lit the screen. He answered on the 2nd ring. I think it's better if we end this, she said, skipping every soft place in between. Marcus closed his eyes. I'm listening, he said, though every instinct told him not to. This situation has already cost too much, Lena continued, her voice controlled, brittle. Your reputation, my authority, my health. If we keep going, whatever this is, it will only get worse. Is that what you want? Marcus asked. A pause. That doesn't matter, she said. What matters is what's practical. The word landed hard. I can provide for the baby, Lena went on. Every opportunity, every advantage. You don't need to complicate your daughter's life with this. Marcus pictured Aaliyah's face when she'd asked whether he stood up or stepped back. You're asking me to disappear, he said quietly. I'm asking you to survive, Lena replied. You've already done enough. That was the lie. He heard it clearly now. After the call ended, Marcus sat alone in the dark living room, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls. For the first time since Naomi died, he felt the familiar pull of retreat, the temptation to do what he'd always done. Absorb the damage, carry it quietly, keep moving. The next morning, he told Aaliyah a version of the truth. That situation at work, he said carefully, it's complicated and I'm stepping back. She didn't argue, she just looked at him for a long moment. Did you choose that? She asked. Or did someone choose it for you? Marcus didn't answer. Weeks passed, work returned to routine. Lena's name surfaced less in meetings. An interim leadership structure took shape. The tension eased, but the cost settled in Marcus's chest like something unfinished. Then late one night, his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Reed, a woman's voice asked. This is Dr. Patel from St. Alden Medical Center. You're listed as an emergency contact for Lena Whitmore. Marcus was already standing. She collapsed, the doctor continued. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, early organ stress. The baby is stable. She is not. When Marcus arrived at the hospital, Lena looked smaller than he'd ever seen her. No defenses, no control. Just a woman who had tried to carry everything alone and failed. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I was never good at leaving, Marcus replied. Tears slid silently down her temples. I thought letting you go was strength, she said. But I don't know how to do this alone. Marcus took her hand, steady and sure. Neither do I, he said, but walking away was the easy thing. Lena turned toward him, eyes raw. And you're done choosing easy, Marcus nodded. Outside the room, machines beeped steadily. Inside, the hardest choice of their lives was about to be made, together or not at all. Because next, Marcus will have to tell his daughter the whole truth, and that truth will change everything. Marcus waited until morning, not because he was afraid, but because some truths deserved daylight. Aaliyah sat at the kitchen table, cereal growing soggy as she scrolled on her phone. She looked up when Marcus sat across from her, noticing immediately that this wasn't another half-explanation wrapped in careful words. "You're serious," she said. "Yes," Marcus replied, "about everything." He told her all of it. The night that should never have happened. The pregnancy, the boardroom, the decision to step back, the call from the hospital, the truth he'd been too scared to say out loud. He didn't edit himself, didn't protect his ego, didn't pretend he had all the answers. Aaliyah listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When he finally stopped talking, the silence stretched so long Marcus began to brace for anger. Instead, she asked, "Do you love her?" The question stunned him. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly, "but I know I care and I know I don't want to run anymore." Aaliyah nodded slowly, processing. "And the baby?" "Yes," he said. "She's your sister." Half-sister, technically, but he didn't correct her. Aaliyah stared down at the table, tracing the rim of her bowl with one finger. "I always wondered what Mom would say if she were here," she said quietly. "About you being so careful all the time." Marcus swallowed. "She used to tell me I was hiding," he admitted. "I just didn't listen." Aaliyah finally looked up at him. "You know what hurts the most?" "What?" "That you thought lying was protecting me." The words cut, but they were clean, honest. "I needed to see you choose the hard thing," she continued. "Not the safe thing." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. "I'm trying now," he said. "I don't know how this ends, but I won't disappear again." Aaliyah stood and walked around the table. She hesitated, then hugged him, tight, fierce. "Don't mess this up," she said into his shoulder. He smiled through the sting behind his eyes. "I'll do my best." That afternoon, Marcus returned to the hospital. Lena looked up when he entered, surprise flickering across her face. "I told her," he said. "Everything?" "Yes." "And?" Lena asked, afraid of the answer. "She told me to stop choosing easy." Lena let out a shaky breath. They talked for hours, not about strategy or logistics, but fear. About parents who taught them strength through silence, about the cost of always being in control. "I don't know how to be a partner," Lena said, "or a mother." Marcus took her hand. "Neither do I. But I know how to stay." For the first time, Lena didn't pull away. Outside the hospital room, life moved forward, indifferent, relentless. But inside, something fragile and real was forming. Not a promise, not a plan, a decision. To try, and that choice would soon be tested, by the world, by power, and by a future neither of them could fully control. Because next, a birth approaches. And with it, a reckoning no one can prepare for. The months that followed were not peaceful. They were quieter, yes, but quiet didn't mean easy. Lena returned home under strict medical orders. No 16-hour days, no late-night crisis calls. No pretending her body wasn't demanding what her mind refused to give. The board insisted on weekly updates. The scrutiny didn't disappear, it simply changed shape. Marcus adjusted his life around the gaps. He drove Lena to appointments when she allowed it. Sat in waiting rooms scrolling through unread emails. Learned the rhythm of hospital hallways, the language of ultrasounds, the way doctors spoke carefully when risks still lingered. They didn't label what they were doing, that made it safer. Aaliyah was cautious at first. She watched Lena the way she watched thunderstorms, fascinated, wary, ready to retreat if the sky darkened too quickly. But slowly, walls softened. One evening, Lena asked Aaliyah about school, not politely, not distracted. Genuinely, Aaliyah talked about a book she loved. Lena listened, asked questions, remembered the answers. Later, when Marcus noticed Aaliyah helping Lena choose nursery colors on a tablet, something tight inside him finally loosened. It wasn't perfect. Some nights Lena worked too late anyway. Some mornings Marcus slipped back into control instead of presence. Old habits don't die quietly, they argue for survival. One night after an argument about a board call Lena took against medical advice, she snapped, "You don't get to manage me." Marcus replied just as sharp, "And you don't get to pretend this only affects you." The silence afterward was heavy. "I'm afraid," Lena admitted finally, "if I stop being who I've always been, I won't know who's left." Marcus softened. "You don't have to erase yourself, just make room." The due date crept closer. The city shifted into winter. Streets glistened with rain. Time felt slower, heavier, as if everything was holding its breath. The night Lena went into labor, Marcus was in Aaliyah's room helping her study. Lena's call came short and sharp. "It's time." The drive to the hospital felt unreal. Aaliyah's leg bounced nervously in the backseat. Marcus's hands shook on the wheel. In the delivery room, Lena was fierce and exhausted and terrified. She reached for Marcus's hand without thinking and didn't let go. Hours blurred. Then a cry cut through everything, small, strong. Alive. Marcus felt his knees weaken as the nurse placed the baby in Lena's arms. Tears streamed freely down Lena's face, unfiltered and unguarded. "She's beautiful," Aaliyah whispered, stepping closer. Lena looked up at Marcus, eyes shining. "You stayed." "I said I would," he replied. They named her Maya, meaning strength. As Marcus watched his daughters, one holding the other's tiny hand, he realized something fundamental had shifted. Not because fear disappeared, but because he chose to stay anyway. Yet even as joy filled the room, reality waited outside the door. Because tomorrow the world would come knocking, and not everyone would welcome what they'd built. Next, the consequences arrive. And Marcus will learn that choosing family doesn't end the fight. It begins a new one. The hospital room emptied quickly after the congratulations faded. Flowers crowded the windowsill, cards stacked unevenly on the side table. Maya slept in a clear bassinet, chest rising and falling with soft determination, unaware of the world waiting to measure her worth. Marcus watched her for a long time. He wished he could freeze the moment, because the morning after joy is when reality returns. Lena was discharged 2 days later. Medical leave was extended. The board sent polite messages, supportive in tone, careful in language. Nothing openly hostile, nothing truly warm. The silence was strategic. Back at work, Marcus felt it immediately. Projects he once led were reassigned temporarily. Meetings happened without him. Compliments became conditional. He wasn't being punished, but he wasn't being trusted either. In the elevator one morning, a senior consultant offered a tight smile. "Big changes lately," the man said. "Yes," Marcus replied. "They tend to reveal things." At home, the pressure showed differently. Lena tried to work while feeding Maya, tried to take calls during naps, tried to pretend she could return unchanged. Marcus finally said what had been building for weeks. "You don't have to prove anything right now." Lena snapped back. "If I don't, they'll replace me." "Or maybe," he said gently, "they already decided and you're just exhausting yourself trying to outrun it." That night, Lena cried for the first time since the birth. Not quiet tears, ugly ones. "I don't know how to be anything other than excellent," she admitted. "And excellence used to protect me." Marcus held her. "It still can, just not alone." Aaliyah struggled too. She loved Maya, but the shift was real. The house felt smaller, attention divided. One night she asked, "Am I still your priority?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Always, loving her doesn't shrink what I have for you." Aaliyah nodded, but Marcus saw the doubt linger. The call came on a Friday afternoon. Daniel Cross. "Marcus," he said pleasantly, "the board has made a decision regarding restructuring." Marcus listened carefully. Lena would return, but not as CEO. A strategic repositioning. A ceremonial title, power without authority. "They're offering you stability," Daniel continued. "And frankly, we're surprised you haven't considered other opportunities. A clean reset." Marcus understood the subtext. Leave quietly, protect the brand, take the hint. That evening, Marcus told Lena everything. She didn't yell, didn't argue. She just stared at the wall for a long time. "So that's it," she said finally. "I fought my whole life for that seat, and they waited for the right moment to take it." "They underestimated you," Marcus replied. She shook her head. "No, they waited for me to become human." The next morning, Lena made a decision that surprised everyone, including Marcus. She declined the repositioned role, resigned. The news spread fast. The reactions were immediate: shock, speculation. Judgment. At home, Marcus felt the weight of it settle. No safety net. No title, no guarantee, just a choice. That night, Marcus stood at Maya's crib while Lena slept, exhausted and emptied. Aaliyah leaned against the doorway. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked. Marcus looked at his daughters, and for the first time he answered without calculation. "Yes," he said, "because we're choosing this." But the world wasn't finished testing that choice. Next, the offer that tempts Marcus back into safety. And the question that will define who he really is. The offer arrived quietly. No dramatic meeting, no official announcement. Just an email marked confidential that appeared in Marcus Reed's inbox on a Monday morning. A rival firm, global reach, impressive numbers, and a title that promised everything Marcus had spent his life chasing. Senior Managing Director, executive autonomy, a compensation package generous enough to silence doubt. They wanted him immediately. Marcus read the email 3 times before closing his laptop. Safety had a shape. This was it. At dinner that night, Lena pushed food around her plate while Maya slept nearby. The exhaustion of resignation still clung to her, but beneath it was something else. Relief, maybe, or grief finally allowed to breathe. "They want me," Marcus said carefully. "Another firm." Lena looked up. "That was fast." "They've been watching," he replied. "Waiting." Aaliyah, doing homework at the counter, looked between them. "Is that good?" "It could be," Marcus said. He explained the offer, the resources, the reset. He didn't say what it meant. Lena understood anyway. They want you without the mess, she said softly. Without me? Marcus didn't deny it. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Marcus lay awake listening to the quiet sounds of the house. The soft hum of the fridge, Maya's faint breaths through the baby monitor, Aaliyah turning in her sleep. In the dark, the old logic crept in. You've done enough. You've proven your integrity. Take the win. The next morning, he met the recruiter in a glass cafe downtown. You deserve a place where your talent isn't questioned, the woman said smoothly. Where optics don't overshadow excellence. Marcus nodded. And, she added, this would require a clean transition, no lingering entanglements. We value discretion. There it was, the unspoken condition. That evening, Marcus walked through the park alone. Autumn leaves crunched beneath his shoes. Parents pushed strollers. Children laughed without understanding what it took to stand where they stood. When he returned home, Aaliyah was waiting. You're thinking about leaving, she said. Marcus sighed. I am. She didn't accuse him, just asked, is it the easy way? The question hit harder than any boardroom challenge. Later, Marcus sat beside Lena on the couch. They want me to start over, he said, without complications. Lena stared at the floor. I won't be angry if you go. That's not the same as wanting me to. A long pause. I don't want you to sacrifice yourself, she said finally. I already lost everything. Marcus reached for her hand. I'm not sacrificing, I'm choosing. For us. For who I want to be. The recruiter followed up the next day. So did the board subtly, encouraging him to accept, to move on, to let the story close neatly. Marcus stood in his office, staring out at the skyline. Once, he would have taken the offer without hesitation. But now, safety felt like another kind of prison, and the decision he made next would decide whether this family was temporary or real. Next, Marcus makes his final stand, and the world finally sees him without armor. Marcus Reed declined the offer on a Wednesday morning. No negotiation, no counter, no hesitation. Just a short, professional response thanking them for the opportunity and closing the door on the safest exit he had ever been offered. When he hit send, his hands didn't shake. That surprised him. The fallout came faster than he expected. By Friday, word had circulated through professional circles. Recruiters went quiet. Invitations paused. The unspoken question hovered wherever Marcus went. Why would he turn that down? He stopped trying to answer. Instead, Marcus did something radical. He went home early. Aaliyah was in the living room, surrounded by textbooks, frustration etched across her face. When Marcus walked in, she blinked in surprise. You're early, she said. I know, he replied. I thought we could study together. She smiled, small, real. Later, Marcus cooked dinner while Lena fed Maya, the house filled with ordinary sounds. Plates clinking, a baby's soft fuss, Aaliyah humming absent-mindedly. Nothing impressive, everything important. That night, Marcus finally spoke the words he'd been avoiding. I don't know what my career looks like now, he told Lena. But I know what my life does. Lena studied him carefully. You didn't have to choose this. I did, he said, and I'd do it again. Something in her expression shifted, not gratitude, trust. Weeks passed. Marcus consulted independently, building something slower, smaller, but honest. Lena explored advisory work on her own terms. No titles, no politics, just impact. It wasn't glamorous, it was real. One afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected call from a former client. We heard what you did, the man said. Walking away like that, it told us something. About what? About who you are. The offer that followed wasn't safe, but it was aligned. Marcus accepted. That evening, he came home with takeout and a smile he hadn't worn in years. We're going to be okay, he told Aaliyah. She raised an eyebrow. You sure? Yes, he said. Because I'm finally not running. Lena watched from the doorway, Maya asleep in her arms. You chose us, she said quietly. Marcus shook his head. I chose me and us came with it. She laughed softly, then surprised him by saying, I think I want to try. Not just surviving, actually building something. He met her gaze. Together, she nodded. Outside, the city continued its restless motion. Inside, something steadier took shape, not perfection, commitment. But life rarely allows peace without one last test. Because the call that came next would force Marcus to confront the man he used to be and the fear he thought he'd outgrown. Next, the past returns, and with it, the final reckoning. The call came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Marcus was on the living room floor helping Aaliyah with a history project when his phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped him cold. Evan Reed, his younger brother. They hadn't spoken in years. Marcus stepped into the kitchen before answering. Evan, a pause, then, hey man, I didn't know if you'd pick up. Neither did Marcus. What's wrong? He asked, instinctively bracing. I'm in town, Evan said, and I could really use your help. The words carried a familiar weight. Growing up, Marcus had always been the responsible one, the fixer, the shield. Evan had been brilliant but reckless, always expecting Marcus to clean up the aftermath. Marcus had spent years distancing himself from that role, convincing himself it was necessary. "Tell me what's going on," he said. Evan exhaled. "I messed up. Again, I lost my job. I've been crashing on couches. I don't want to ask, but I don't have anyone else." Marcus closed his eyes. This was the test he hadn't expected. Not ambition, not power, family. That evening, Evan sat awkwardly on the couch while Lena fed Maya and Aaliyah hovered nearby, curious but cautious. Evan looked older than Marcus remembered, thinner, worn down by consequences he could no longer outrun. "I don't want to be a burden," Evan said quietly. Marcus nodded. "Then don't be. Be honest." Over dinner, Evan admitted everything, the shortcuts, the excuses, the way he'd always believed Marcus would be there to catch him. "I thought being strong meant handling everything alone," Evan said. "Turns out I was just avoiding responsibility." Marcus felt something settle inside him. "I used to think strength meant control," he replied. "Turns out it means staying present." Lena listened, silent but attentive. Later that night, Marcus sat alone, thinking about the man he'd been, the one who believed love was something you rationed carefully so it couldn't be used against you. That man would have sent Evan money and kept his distance. This man did something different. "You can stay," Marcus told him the next morning, "but you don't get saved, you do the work." Evan nodded, eyes bright with something like relief. "I will." The house adjusted slowly. Aaliyah watched closely. One evening she asked, "Are you afraid he'll let you down?" Marcus considered the question. "Yes, but that can't be the reason I stopped showing up." Lena met his gaze across the room. Later, as they stood watching Maya sleep, Lena said, "You're different than when I met you." "I hope so," Marcus replied. "You're not hiding anymore," she said. "Even when it costs you." Marcus smiled faintly. "Especially then?" The past hadn't returned to pull him backward. It had returned to prove how far he'd come. But one final chapter still waited. Because the story wasn't just about who Marcus refused to be anymore, it was about who he chose to become next. Next, the future takes its first real step, and this family faces its defining moment. Spring arrived quietly, not with grand announcements or sudden breakthroughs, but with small, stubborn signs of growth. Marcus noticed it first in the mornings, the way Aaliyah no longer flinched when plans changed, the way Lena laughed more easily without scanning the room for judgment, the way Evan woke up early, dressed for interviews, no longer waiting to be rescued. Life wasn't lighter, but it was steadier. Marcus's consulting work began to take shape, slowly, deliberately. Clients came through referrals, not reputation alone. They didn't want polish. They wanted honesty, someone who understood pressure without worshiping it. One afternoon, Marcus stood in a modest conference room pitching a proposal when he realized something that startled him. He wasn't afraid, not to be misunderstood, not being judged, not to lose everything again. He had already survived that. That evening, Lena cooked dinner badly. Pasta is overcooked, sauce burned. They laughed anyway. "I never learned how to do ordinary things," she admitted. "I thought excellence had to be extraordinary," Marcus smiled. "Ordinary is harder, it requires staying." Aaliyah rolled her eyes from the table. "You two are getting sentimental." But she was smiling. Later that night, Marcus found Lena standing by the window, Maya asleep against her chest. "I got an email today," Lena said. Marcus stiffened slightly. "From the board?" "No," she replied. "From a nonprofit. They want me to help redesign leadership pipelines for women who leave corporate roles after becoming mothers." He studied her face. "Do you want to?" "Yes," she said. "For the first time, it feels like choice, not survival." Marcus reached for her hand. "Then it's right." The weekend brought a small gathering, nothing formal, just family and a few friends. Evan grilled. Aaliyah played music too loudly. Maya slept through most of it, blissfully unaware of the improbable world she'd been born into. At one point, Marcus stepped back and watched them all. This wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was the life he'd chosen. Lena joined him, leaning lightly against his shoulder. "I used to think letting people see me would make me weak," she said. "Now I think it's the only reason I'm still standing." Marcus nodded. "I used to think perfection was protection. And now I know it was just fear dressed nicely." They stood there as the sun dipped low, the city glowing softly in the distance. But even as peace settled in, Marcus understood something clearly. The endings weren't clean. They were earned. And there was one more moment, one final reckoning waiting just ahead. Because tomorrow, Marcus would be asked to speak publicly for the first time since everything changed. Not as an executive, not as a survivor, but as a man willing to be seen. Next, the final chapter. And the moment Marcus Reed tells the truth, without armor, without apology. Marcus Reed stood behind the podium longer than necessary. The room wasn't hostile, but it wasn't forgiving either. Industry leaders, young professionals, consultants, students, people who had heard about him but didn't know him. Not really. He wasn't here as an executive, not as a comeback story, not as a cautionary tale. He was here because someone had asked him to speak about leadership, and for the first time in his life, Marcus didn't prepare armor. He took a breath. "I used to believe leadership meant never letting anyone see you bleed," he began. "I thought control was strength, silence was safety, perfection was survival." A few heads nodded. "I was wrong." The room grew still. "I lost my wife years ago. I raised a daughter while convincing myself I was protecting her by being flawless. What I was really doing was hiding, from grief, from risk, from being fully human." He spoke about the boardroom, about fear disguised as professionalism, about how quickly respect becomes conditional when you stop fitting the narrative. "I was given an easy way out," Marcus continued. "A clean exit, prestige, distance, and for most of my life I would have taken it without question." He paused. "But leadership isn't about escaping consequences. It's about standing inside them." He talked about Aaliyah, about the night she asked whether he chose the hard thing or the safe one, about Maya born into uncertainty but surrounded by presence, about Lena learning that ambition didn't have to mean isolation. "I didn't become weaker by being seen," Marcus said quietly. "I became honest, and honesty changed everything." The silence after he finished wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Earned, then the room applauded, not politely but deeply. The kind of applause that said, "We recognize ourselves in this." Afterward, a young man approached him. "I've been afraid my whole life," the man said. "Afraid that one mistake would erase everything." Marcus smiled gently. "It doesn't, but running from it will." That night, Marcus came home to a house filled with familiar noise. Evan laughing too loudly. Aaliyah arguing about music. Lena rocking Maya by the window. "How did it go?" Lena asked. "I told the truth," Marcus replied. She studied his face. And for the first time," he said, "I wasn't afraid of what it would cost." Lena leaned into him. Aaliyah pretended not to notice, but smiled anyway. Later, Marcus stood alone for a moment, watching Maya sleep. Her tiny hand curled instinctively, gripping air as if she already knew the world required courage. He whispered, "I stayed." And he meant more than one thing. Life didn't become perfect, but it became real, and that was enough. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If this journey moved you, if it reminded you that courage isn't loud, perfection isn't protection, and family is built by choosing to stay, then subscribe to this channel. We share stories like this every week. Stories about hard choices, quiet strength, and the moments that redefine who we are. Leave a comment and tell me, what part of this story stayed with you the most? Because someone out there needs to hear that choosing the hard thing might just save them.